Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
Saturday, noon kickoff. I don't need to tell you folks, if you're already here and listening, which I hope you are. If you hear me right now, then you are listening. And you know it is game week. Ohio State set to kick off its 2019 college football season this Saturday at noon. Ohio State against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, that's on Fox, a noon kickoff. Ohio State is a 27.5-point favorite. Good Monday, everybody. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. We are the Unscripted Ohio Podcast on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. We are kicking it off this week with five regularly scheduled podcasts between myself and Johnny Bullitt and Corey Thompson of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. I will be here on Wednesday as well as Friday this week. 3 shows for this week, while Corey and Johnny will be coming at you Tuesday and Thursday. So that's 5 shows. And as an added bonus, on Thursday, our first Gridiron Game Time podcast with Shane Larson, kicking it off. Thursday, he'll be talking about college football in general. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about the atrocity that was the Miami-Florida game over the weekend. But hey, college football is here, so Shane will be at you on Thursday talking about college football. We are brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by Buckeye, so check them out at jfqlending.com with support, of course, here on the show from GoBus. GoBus has over 40 stops across Ohio with popular destinations like the Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and many of Ohio's big cities. Check them out at ridegobus.com or give them a call, 1-888-95-GO-BUS. Make your travel plans now, folks. Football is almost here. It's coming at you Saturday. The Buckeyes are back, babies. I'm sure you're excited about that. I tell you what, the game on Saturday notwithstanding, Miami and Florida, that was abysmal. That set college football back 10 years. There was not a lot of excitement in that game. It was boring. It was very bad football. Both teams were undisciplined. They couldn't protect. I mean, Miami's offensive line is really bad. Florida's was not much better. I was actually, mildly impressed with Jarren Williams. He took a couple of bad sacks, and I don't think he felt the pressure very well. But all things considering, with how much pressure that Florida front seven was giving Miami, and as bad as Miami's offensive line was, you have to give some credit to the depth and speed of Florida's front seven. But for all the pressure they were getting him, I thought Williams handled it pretty well. Not to open up an old wound here, but I really don't think that Miami would have been as competitive in that game if Tate Martell were at quarterback. It's hard to say for sure, and I'm not trying to dig on Tate, but I really do think Jarren Williams, all things considered, without a running game consistently, without much protection, I thought he did a pretty good job handling that game. He managed it well. He didn't make a lot of bad decisions throwing the ball. He was fairly accurate. A lot of short, intermediate stuff, but they were playing to his strengths. But it was just a bad game. But so I want to rewind though, because while the game itself was not all that fascinating with all the penalties and bad tackling, missed tackles, and just really bad offensive football. I made the joke, by the way. It's like, for as much as the turnover chain motivated Miami's defense, you would have hoped that the orange first down chains would have motivated their offense just as much. But rewinding a little bit, so I got pumped for football starting this week, and a lot of it had to do. I did not watch game day. I know several people were tweeting about watching college game day on Saturday. I did not watch that, but I did pay attention a little bit to Fox's coverage with their new analysis team of Matt Leinart, Brady Quinn, Reggie Bush, and of course Urban Meyer. And I want to just say this: I was really, really impressed with the whole panel. I thought that they were very cohesive, and they didn't force issues. If all of you know one thing about ESPN programming, regardless of what show it is, regardless of what sport it is, ESPN is very, very good about playing up controversy and talking points, and they just overdo it sometimes. And I'm not telling you anything you guys and girls don't know. ESPN just they will find an issue and they will force it down your throats. I thought Fox felt very authentic in its coverage on Saturday. Reggie Bush seemed like it felt like to me he was being very sincere. He was calling it like it was. He was just, ripping off or speaking his mind and ripping off talking points, or not talking points, but things he genuinely felt. And that was really, really good to see. Brady Quinn has done a great job. Brady Quinn, when he first started several years ago, I thought felt a little dry, but he has really, really improved. He's very sharp. Matt Leinart felt comfortable. And Urban, I've got to say this. When Urban took a year off between, after he retired from Florida the second time, remember he retired actually twice. The first time, Jeremy Foley, the AD at Florida, actually talked him into returning. He retired and then came back. But the second time he retired, of course, he took off. He was in the broadcasting booth for ESPN. And then, of course, he wound up at Ohio State in 2012 and then spent the last 7 seasons at Ohio State, going 7-0 against Michigan. You know all that. He winning the national championship, going out here this past season, winning the Rose Bowl. I don't need to tell you all that, but I'm going to remind you anyway because it's football season, and I want to put smiles on everyone's faces here this entire week. And by the way, this week, I mentioned all the shows that we got coming. I'm going to try to have on later this week Kevin Noon and Ross Bolton and Kirk Barton, of course, former Ohio State captain Kirk Barton. I'm going to try to have them on for a preview show later this week. I'm thinking that'll be Friday, but we'll talk the Buckeyes and preview the Saturday game and the season. So, but Urban, he was in the broadcast booth. Of course, spent the last 7 seasons at Ohio State. I got to say, just from the sample we saw from him on Fox on Saturday, it really felt like Urban was so much more comfortable than the first time around. When he was in the announcer booth in 2011 for ESPN, he was, it's not that he didn't have good insight, but he was dry. He felt nervous at times, didn't really get into it. But I got to say, on Saturday for Fox, if that's any indication what we're going to see from the Fox pregame shows and postgame shows and halftime analysis the rest of the season, I think Fox is onto something with this group. These 4 that I mentioned, Bush, Leinart, Quinn, and Urban Meyer, they did really well together. They were insightful. They didn't seem to force the issue. They didn't seem like they were nervous. They didn't seem like they all felt like they had chemistry together. I was really, really impressed, and Urban especially felt so much more comfortable this time around than he did in 2011. He even made a really cool crack. They asked the question, "Is this Michigan's year?" And of course, Urban quipped, "For what?" And what is this Michigan's year? And what? But he went on. He made the little Michigan joke. Everybody laughed, and then he went on to explain what Michigan's got going for it. And he made this point, and I'm really big on the Michigan receiving corps. They have really, really talented receivers. I don't know if Tariq Black is going to be healthy. I don't know if Donovan Peoples-Jones will completely live up to his potential, but if there's one thing I like about that Michigan offense, is that it's potentially that wide receiving core. They are very, very talented. Urban mentioned that. So, hey, the Fox pregame show, the Fox analysis on Saturday, got to give it 2 thumbs up. An unscripted Ohio high five to the Fox network. Really, really good coverage. So much better than ESPN. I know personally, when I flip on college football coverage this year, I know what channel I am going to be landing on first because of how impressed I was with that Saturday coverage. So, hey, football is here, folks. We are in game week. Very, very excited. As I said, Ohio State, Florida Atlantic coming up noon on Saturday. That is on Fox. 27.5-point favorites. The Buckeyes are over the FAU Owls. So we'll be having coverage all week long leading up. I'm sure Johnny and Corey will be talking about the game on both shows this week, Tuesday and Thursday. I know I will be talking about it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And, of course, I'm sure Shane will mention it on the Gridiron Game Time podcast coming up Thursday. So switching gears, Corey, my man Corey Thompson of the Scarlet and Gray podcast, brought this up. He's been running some cool polls this week on Twitter asking, some of your favorite, some of the best combinations at different positions relative to the coaches. Of course, if you think a couple weeks back, Corey was on here on the show, and we went over our starting lineups for the past three coaches, John Cooper, Jim Tressel, and Urban Meyer. And we kind of went over the best players at each position that we would start if we came up with an all-time team for each coach. Well, he's been kind of playing off that on Twitter and asking and running some different polls for different positions. And, of course, he came up with one, who are the best bookend tackles for each coach, Tressel, Cooper, and Urban. And predictably, Orlando Pace and Corey Stringer were winning handily, and they should. But they weren't completely unanimous, which, it doesn't shock me because there are some people, if you're under the age of 30 or especially 25 or 21, if you're in college right now, if you're 18, 19, 20, 21 listening to the show, you didn't get to see Corey Stringer or Orlando Pace play. But I got to tell you, if you had, this wouldn't even be a conversation. And, this got me thinking. I actually went back on YouTube, and I mentioned this. I pulled this up and showed this highlight clip on my Twitter account. So go to KYLam8 and check this out. Check it out on my timeline if you're curious to see this. But I went back and pulled up a couple minutes highlight reel of Orlando Pace and watching him, and it brought back so many memories watching him play. Look, I can't properly do justice just how good, if you're listening right now and you don't know much about Orlando Pace or you're too young to have seen him play, I could not do justice just how good and how fun he was to watch. He was on another level. And Corey Stringer, look, if I were to go down the line of offensive linemen that ever played for Ohio State, now I will also explain that my basis for watching Ohio State football starts with right around 1990. Okay, that's when I was old enough as a kid to start appreciating players. I remember some players a little bit in the late 80s when I was even younger. Like, I just have fragments of memories of Chris Spielman. But really, for me, my football memories begin roughly 91, 92, 93, okay? That's when I feel like I can adequately discuss and compare players. So that's my frame of reference. But that being said, if I'm going down the line and ranking offensive linemen for Ohio State, there's no question in my mind. Number one is Orlando Pace. Number two is Corey Stringer. There's a gap between them. And then there's another huge gap between Stringer and anybody else you can think of, in the last 30 years for Ohio State. It's just those two are head and shoulders at the top, and I would say Pace is in a class of his own for as good as Stringer was. Look, I said this on Twitter, and this really is incredible, okay? In the 3 seasons that Orlando Pace played for Ohio State, he allowed a total of 2 total sacks. 2 sacks in 3 seasons. Both of them were his freshman year when he was, by the way, a co-offensive player of the year, or co-freshman of the year in the Big Ten for Ohio State. And he was also on the first team All Big Ten all 3 seasons he played. But he gave up a total of 2 sacks. Both of them were his freshman year. And to really give you an idea of just how impressive that is, and that in itself is impressive, in those 3 seasons, Ohio State's primary quarterbacks attempted 955 passes. So he was out there for roughly 900, probably 900, 950 offensive snaps in which a pass was attempted, and he gave up a total of 2 sacks in his career. And if that doesn't do justice alone, I mean, his run blocking was probably even better than his pass protection, and that's scary. And the statistic, the pancake, how many times defensive players got put on their butts on the ground, that became fashionable in the 90s because of Orlando Pace. Analysts around the country were actually tracking how many times Orlando Pace put somebody on the ground because he was that dominant. And, look, he finished second in the Heisman voting his final season at Ohio State. He was that good as an offensive tackle. It was really just incredible. He didn't just beat people off the line. If he didn't put you on your butt, if you were lucky enough to stay on your feet, he drove you 5 to 10 yards downfield. And that's not an exaggeration. It was just the most dominant performer or player that I have ever seen at Ohio State. So, Orlando Pace, if you were not young enough to, have seen him play, I hope that this will give you a little incentive to do some more background because he truly was great. If you have seen him play, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, that you don't already remember, but I hope that, I'm giving you some, a blast from the past, and this is a little bit of nostalgia that you can appreciate. So it made me think of this. With Corey posting these polls, I want you to go on Twitter in the next couple days after you hear this podcast, Monday afternoon, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, Monday night, Tuesday, whenever you're listening. Go on Twitter, and I want you to tell me your top 4 players at Ohio State. If there's 4 players that you wish you could see play again in the Scarlet and Gray, who would they be? Give me your Mount Rushmore of Ohio State football. And understand that I don't want you to list players that you didn't see, okay? If you're not old enough to remember Archie Griffin, like I'm not, I was not alive when Archie Griffin played, don't list players that you didn't see. It's understood that you can only, go back to your frame of reference. So I want you to give me your Mount Rushmore, your 4 players that if you could see play in their peak condition, in their prime, who would you want playing for Ohio State? I'm going to give you my 4 right now. So I've got Orlando Pace. I mentioned him, getting to see those couple minutes of his highlights just from a few select games on YouTube. That just really gave me a lot of nostalgia. It was fun to see him pancaking people again, and it just reminded me just how good that guy was. But here are my other 3, okay? My Mount Rushmore of Ohio State football players in my lifetime. I'm going to give you Orlando Pace, number 1. Number 2 for me is Andy Katzenmoyer. That guy, look, there are legendary stories about Andy Katzenmoyer as a student or lack thereof. There are legendary stories there about his conversationalist skills or lack thereof. Andy Katzenmoyer as a person, as a student, plenty of things that we could sit there and criticize. But I tell you what, guys and gals, when Andy Katzenmoyer stepped on the football field, to this day, there are hits that I remember that Corby Jones hit. You remember the Missouri quarterback? I think it was in 1996, where he runs around the right edge. I believe it was an option play, if memory serves me correctly. He did not pitch it. He runs around, looks like, he felt like he had the corner and tried to cut it upfield, and then all of a sudden you see Andy Katzenmoyer come flying out of nowhere and planting that guy. And I swear Jones probably got lifted up 3 feet in the air on that hit. It was a vicious, vicious hit. One of the hardest hits I have ever. Legal hit, by the way. Even in today's rules, it was a legal hit. He got under the shoulder pads, and it was a perfect form tackle. Andy Katzenmoyer was the best hitter I ever remember seeing at Ohio State. He was all across the field. For his size, he could run really well. He could cover sideline to sidelines. He was not a great guy in pass protection or in pass coverage. In today's modern football, I'm not sure he'd be as effective as a three-down back because of the spread offenses and because how much work he would have to do. But he was capable, and he was not. It was not a liability for him to be on the field in those situations. That today it'd be a little bit different because he didn't have to cover as frequently as he would now. But Andy Katzenmoyer most definitely on my Mount Rushmore of Ohio State football players. But the third one I would have is Sean Springs. Ohio State fans are spoiled. You could get into the conversation about DBU. Is it Louisiana State? LSU? Is it Ohio State? I don't know. You could make an argument for both programs, but I will say this. Ohio State fans, either way, they're spoiled with the number of really, really good defensive backs that they have had come through, especially in the last 25, 30 years. But Sean Springs, for me, is still number one. I mean, Denzel Ward, Antoine Winfield, the list goes on and on and on. But Springs, I think, as a pure cover corner, he wasn't as good of a tackler as Antoine Winfield, because Winfield was, I think that's Winfield's game right there, is that he could cover you in pass routes. But if you tried to run the edge, Antoine Winfield was the best open field tackler as a defensive back I ever remember seeing at Ohio State. But where Springs did not have that good of an ability that Winfield had, he was the best cover corner at Ohio State that I remember. And it's really a shame, because the one thing that he's remembered for most is him slipping in that 1997 game against Michigan. At the end, or 1996 game, was it 96, 97? Yeah. Think, Kyle, get the year correct. But anyway, you remember the spring slip play, the 13-9 game. Michigan upset Ohio State, one of three major upsets in the mid-90s that Michigan had over Ohio State. It's that one play, unfortunately, that Springs gets remembered for the most, but it really is a shame because he had a superb career at Ohio State. So Sean Springs, for me, is number 3. And I debated this for a long time as to my fourth selection for my Mount Rushmore for Ohio State football. But after a lot of careful consideration, I decided to go with Zeke over Joey Bosa. Look, you could have picked any number of guys in the last 10, 15 years. I opted for 3 Cooper guys as well as Zeke. I think Zeke gets put on there because of the run he had, no pun intended, at the end, the last 3 games of the 2014 season. It's just really incredible for the opponents that he went against. Wisconsin, a top 10 defense, Alabama, a top 10 defense, and then Oregon, not necessarily a top 10 defense, but they were playing a lot better defense there at the end of the year. They were probably a top 20, top 25 defense. But for Zeke to go and finish the season in games of that magnitude against teams of that magnitude and put up over 200 yards rushing in each of the 3 games, relative to the magnitude of those games right there in that 2014 season, I don't know that we've ever seen a stretch as impressive and as important as an Ohio State player has put up as Zeke put in those 3 games. That was a truly historic performance. It capped off a really, really good season for Zeke. So there are a lot of players that maybe you could argue deserve, in the whole, maybe deserve it a little bit more than him. But those 3 games en route to a national title in 2014 were huge. And so for that reason, I'm going to put Zeke as my 4th selection for the Ohio State Mount Rushmore. So anyway, so Mount Rushmore, Ohio State football. I want to hear your list. Please tweet at me at KYLam8. I will do my best to like and retweet some of them. Would love to hear your takes. Mount Rushmore, who are your 4 Ohio State football players that you either enjoyed the most, would love to see play again if you could for Ohio State? Whatever the criteria is, give me your 4, the 4 great ones that you remember seeing play for the Buckeyes. It's game week. We're going to kick up the nostalgia a level here, and this should be a fun exercise. So, real quick, one last thing that I want to talk about. So I saw a lot of you reacting, and of course I discussed this a little bit myself on Twitter. Ohio State making some changes to the game day atmosphere coming up for this season. we already knew that Ohio State was adding Wi-Fi to the stadium. Interestingly enough, there were some people complaining about Wi-Fi being added. And look, I'm just gonna say this: like every change that I can remember being made to Ohio Stadium, to the game day atmosphere, to the game day experience, everything that's ever been done that I can remember, there's been somebody complaining about it. And, some more than others, some things more than others. But there's always someone out there that doesn't like change. And this is just the world we live in. We're creatures of habit, and we hate adjusting to new things. But from experience, I will tell you this: even if you are not very happy or very supportive of this new particular change that Ohio State announced this past week, with DJs coming to the field at Ohio Stadium during football games. Yes, you heard that right. If you didn't hear this already, there will be a live DJ on the field at Ohio Stadium during Ohio State football games this fall. The DJ is going to be playing during commercial breaks, timeouts, that sort of thing, halftime. The purpose of the DJ will be to enhance the game day experience with more music. And this is not really going to change. I know the biggest refrain I saw on Twitter over the weekend about this is that, well, it's kind of taking away from the Ohio State marching band, the best damn band in the land. But to be honest, it's not really. The pop music has already been played in Ohio Stadium for several years. I remember back in the 90s when Ohio Stadium started trending towards more actual music in the stadium. People were complaining about that back then. They wanted to hear the band. But that's been happening for, 15, 20 years now. Okay, the band, there's still a place for the band. They'll still play at the beginning of the game. They'll still play at halftime. You'll still hear them occasionally in the stands, probably before the fourth quarter. That is not going away. You're still going to get the traditional experience of the Ohio State marching band. All this is doing really is taking the music and it's taking it one step further. They're putting a DJ on the field to try to enhance the atmosphere. Now, I think probably for 75% of us out there, me included, look, a DJ does nothing for me. I'm not going to go or not go to a football game because there's a DJ there, okay? It doesn't change much for me. I'm very ambivalent about this. However, what Ohio State is trying to do is they're trying to reach the younger crowd, the millennials. They're trying to reach the Generation Zs, okay? It's very well known that millennials these days are not attending sporting events like people in years past. It's easy for any of us to say, well, they should appreciate the tradition. They should appreciate the greatness of the Ohio State marching band. But that doesn't play, okay? That doesn't play for young people. There's a trend around all of sports, not just college sports, but professional sports as well, that, sports organizations are finding ways to reach millennials and the younger crowd. And one of the popular ways that they're doing it is through popular music. Okay, more pop music, more enhancement surrounding music and using mobile devices, which hence the Wi-Fi. They're trying to reach the teenagers, the early 20s, the people that are always on their phone, constantly on their phone. They're trying to give them a better experience. Now, one common reply that I got over Twitter this weekend was, well, they should lower the prices. And that's certainly one way. There are two real ways that you can improve ticket purchases. Number one would, of course, be to lower the prices. But the other way is to keep the prices the same and give greater value for the price you're paying. And that's what Ohio State's trying to do right now. They're trying to stay on the forefront, and not just now and this year, but they're trying to look at the next 10 to 20 years and make sure that the younger fan base is engaged and continually coming to sporting events. Look, we all know that it's the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s crowd that's making the large donations and supporting the athletic department. And I know some people feel like that this is not fair to them that, Ohio State should be catering to those people. But isn't this the way of the world? This is how it's always been. Businesses are always catering to the younger customers, okay? Pop music is commercialized for the younger crowd. Telephones, cell phones, that is, cars, televisions. People are always catering and targeting the younger audience. That's just the way business works. That's the way it's always been. And I know some people feel alienated that way, but this is the cats in the cradle. This is just year after year. It's always this way. And the younger crowd eventually is going to be the older crowd, and they're going to be in 20 years from now, they're going to be feeling alienated as well, because that's what businesses do. They're looking for the young customer that they can appeal to, that they can get those extra dollars from, and that's what Ohio State is doing. And they're not doing anything unique right now. There's not an 18 or 19-year-old out there that's going to look at this and say, hey, that's turnt. There's a DJ on the field. Ohio Stadium is going to be lit this year. I should buy myself a football ticket. That's not what they're doing. But if they can take a 19-year-old sophomore at Ohio State that didn't get season tickets but, is on the fence about going, and they can enhance the atmosphere, get them in the stadium, trying something different, providing Wi-Fi, providing more live music, providing a better experience for them, then that person, that 19-year-old, that 20-year-old, whatever, might be more inclined to re-up a student ticket, might be more inclined to pay for another ticket to come back to the stadium for more games, and maybe they keep that person as a fan for life. Okay, those are the people that Ohio State is trying to cater to right now, and it's not just them. Professional sports, I mentioned a couple weeks ago in the architectural conversation, State Farm Arena, formerly Phillips Arena in Atlanta, they actually reduced their capacity from 19.5 down to 16.6, okay? And they're doing that because, like a lot of NBA teams, they're going for a more intimate atmosphere. They're trying to get people closer to the action, and they're trying to appeal to the younger crowd. They want to get more teenagers and young 20s and millennials. They want to get them in the arena and buying tickets, and they're doing that with just the same exact thing that Ohio State is doing right here with the DJ. If you look at in the Twitter conversation I had about this, I found a NACDA, which is the National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics. There was a report from 2015 where they were giving advice on how to market to millennials, how to get their attention, how to get their dollars, okay, their disposable income. And that's exactly what Ohio State is doing. They're following the exact advice: more live music, more entertainment. That's what they're trying to do. That's the same reason why, for all of you that are not real crazy about these alternate jerseys that Ohio State continually uses every year, well, that's the reason. They're appealing to the younger crowd. They're appealing to the recruits, to the students, okay? For them, that enhances the atmosphere. Nobody's coming to Ohio State because of a jersey. Nobody's coming to Ohio State because of a DJ. If you're a recruit and you're 18-year-olds, you come on an official visit and you see an alternate jersey and a DJ, that's not why you're picking Ohio State. But if those things increase and enhance the game day experience for that person, then that's a win for Ohio State. That's what they're looking to do. They're just looking for ways to enhance the experience, and that's what a DJ is doing. I think 75% of the people out there are probably like me. You probably don't care if there's a DJ or not. You're not going to notice. You're going to forget about it after the first time. If you are somebody that's complaining about this, I'm making a prediction here. You're going to forget about it after 1 or 2 home games, and it's going to be a non-issue. So for 75%, it's not going to matter. But if they can enhance, if those 10% of the new customers, the new fans, the younger clientele, if they can reach 10% of those people, that's why this is being done. So DJ's coming this fall at Ohio Stadium during football games. I know it sounds crazy to say, but that's the 411, yo. So anyhow, really, really excited. It's game week. Ohio State, Florida Atlantic, noon on Saturday. Fox, I'm really excited about the coverage. Like I said, I can't emphasize this enough. I was really impressed with the coverage on Fox this weekend, but it's coming back noon on Saturday on Fox. Ohio State is a 27.5-point favorite over Lane Kiffin's FAU. By the way, I like Lane's comment. Lane was asked why FAU is playing Ohio State, and he just came right out and say it, and I appreciate his honesty. He said it's for the money. FAU is taking the bye. They're probably getting paid. I didn't look up the exact amount, but it's probably in the neighborhood of $1 million, $800,000, $1 million. That is why they're doing it. But it doesn't matter why they're doing it. It just matters that they are. Ohio State kicking off the 2019 season this Saturday. I'm very excited. We will have more coverage of the game and the season coming up this week. As I said, later this week we'll have a preview. Kevin Noon, publisher of the Buckeye Grove, Kirk Barton, former Ohio State captain, analyst at Buckeye Grove, Ross Bolton, football analyst, will be joining me. We'll have a roundtable discussion, previewing the year, previewing the game, whole bunch of stuff. We'll get into that. And as I mentioned, I'll be here Wednesday and Friday. Corey and Johnny will be here Tuesday and Thursday with the Scarlet and Gray podcast. And Shane Larson will debut the Gridiron Game Time. That'll also be Thursday. Very excited. Next week, Chris Drew will be around with Dog Days, the Cleveland Browns podcast, here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. That's going to do it for me. You can check us out. The Unscripted Ohio podcast will air now every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. All of the aforementioned podcasts will be on the Unscripted Ohio Network, which is also on SoundCloud, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Check me out on Twitter at KYLam8. Make sure you text me. Make sure you tweet me with your Mount Rushmore of Ohio State football. That should be a lot of fun. Some good discussions coming up this week. I'm really excited. It's football season. Have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you again Wednesday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.